Time moves differently when you reach your 70s. Minutes feel like seconds, yet memories from decades ago feel like yesterday. This strange relationship with time becomes even more complex when you realize how many people spend their final years haunted by the same 5 regrets. Those who've spent their lives studying human behavior have noticed something remarkable. Across different cultures and backgrounds, people who reach old age tend to share similar patterns of regret. These aren't random sorrows, but predictable outcomes of how we choose to live our lives. Today, we're going to explore these 5 universal regrets that emerge most clearly in our later years. Understanding them now gives you the power to reshape how you spend your remaining time, regardless of your current age. The wisdom comes not from avoiding all mistakes, but from recognizing which mistakes matter most. Let me share what I've learned from countless conversations with people in their final decades, and how you can use this knowledge to live with greater peace and purpose. The first regret that haunts people centers around how they chose to spend their precious hours. So many discover they wasted years on activities that felt important in the moment, but delivered no lasting meaning. These aren't necessarily bad activities, but they consumed time that could have been invested in something genuinely fulfilling. Picture someone who spends hours each day rearranging collections, obsessing over appearances, or following elaborate routines that add nothing to their inner life. You might know people like this. They appear constantly busy, even overwhelmed by their schedules, yet when they pause to reflect, they struggle to identify what they actually accomplished. These individuals become what wise observers have called the engrossed. Their minds, divided among countless trivial pursuits, never develop depth in anything meaningful. They polish possessions they rarely use. They spend fortunes on treatments to maintain appearances that ultimately fade anyway. They participate in social obligations that drain their energy without enriching their relationships. Each activity seems reasonable in isolation, but together they create what amounts to busy idleness. The tragedy unfolds slowly. These people feel constantly occupied, yet their days vanish into what feels like an abyss of meaningless motion. You've probably seen this in your own life or in others around you. Someone who meticulously maintains a lawn they never sit on. A person who spends hours organizing closets full of things they never use. People who attend social events they don't enjoy just to maintain appearances. When old age forces reflection, this realization hits with devastating clarity. They recognize they spent decades being busy doing nothing, while life's most important opportunities slipped away. The collections they carefully maintained mean nothing. The elaborate routines that once seemed crucial now appear hollow. Here's what you can do differently. Start by honestly evaluating your current activities. Ask yourself whether each regular commitment genuinely contributes to your well-being, personal growth, or meaningful connections. If an activity merely fills time without adding value, consider whether that time might be better invested elsewhere. This doesn't mean abandoning all simple pleasures or practical responsibilities. It means distinguishing between activities that nourish your soul and those that merely occupy your schedule. The goal is intentional living rather than busy existence. The second regret involves the dangerous habit of postponing real living until some future moment. This pattern appears so frequently that those who study human behavior identify it as one of the greatest obstacles to a fulfilling life. People convince themselves they'll begin truly living after reaching certain milestones or ages. We've all heard versions of this thinking: waiting until retirement to pursue passions, delaying travel until the children are grown, postponing personal relationships until careers are established. Each delay seems reasonable, but the pattern creates a habit of treating the present as mere preparation for a future that may never arrive as expected. You know this mindset. After I turn 50, I'll finally have time for myself. Once I retire, I'll start that hobby I've always wanted to try. When the kids move out, then I'll focus on my marriage. The underlying assumption is that real life begins later, while current time serves merely as preparation. This approach creates a cruel irony. People become so focused on preparing for future happiness that they miss opportunities for present contentment. They resemble travelers so absorbed in planning their destination that they miss the entire journey. The emotional cost compounds over time. Years pass while individuals tell themselves they're building toward something better. Meanwhile, their capacity for new experiences may diminish, their health may decline, or their circumstances may change in unexpected ways. When they finally reach their anticipated moment of freedom, they may discover they've forgotten how to enjoy life. Some never get the chance to discover this. Illness or other circumstances intervene before their planned moment of liberation arrives. These individuals face the devastating realization that it becomes too late to begin living just when we must cease to live. I've spoken with people who spent their entire careers looking forward to retirement, only to find themselves lost when it finally arrived. They'd postponed so many interests and relationships that they no longer knew what brought them joy. Others developed health problems just as they were preparing to enjoy their golden years. The solution involves embracing present opportunities while still planning responsibly for the future. This means finding ways to incorporate meaningful activities into your current life rather than postponing them indefinitely. It means treating each day as valuable in itself, not merely as preparation for some distant goal. Consider what aspects of your ideal future life could be explored now, even in small ways. If you dream of creative expression after retirement, begin experimenting with artistic activities today. If you envision more time in nature, find ways to incorporate outdoor experiences into your current routine. The third regret centers on living primarily to meet other people's expectations, rather than honoring your own deepest values and desires. This pattern often develops gradually as individuals adapt to family pressures, career demands, or social expectations without questioning whether these external requirements align with their authentic selves. Those who've observed human nature closely note how many people become wasted for the sake of another. They spend their energy pursuing other people's fortunes, attending to demands from those in power, or dedicating themselves to causes that personally leave them unfulfilled. Over time, they lose touch with their own inner compass. This phenomenon affects people at every level of society. Even those who appear successful and powerful often privately yearn for rest and the chance to live for themselves. People who achieve great things in public life frequently lament how their busy external commitments leave little time for personal reflection and growth. You've probably experienced this yourself or witnessed it in others. The parent who gives up all personal interests to manage their children's activities. The employee who works endless overtime to meet expectations they never questioned. The spouse who constantly adapts to their partner's preferences while losing touch with their own. The pattern often begins with reasonable accommodations. Young people naturally seek approval from parents, teachers, and peers. Career advancement may require temporary sacrifices of personal time and interests. Family responsibilities legitimately demand significant energy and attention. Problems arise when these external demands become so dominant that individuals lose awareness of their own preferences and values. They become skilled at anticipating others' needs while neglecting their own. They develop identities based entirely on their usefulness to other people rather than their intrinsic worth. Years pass in this state of partial imprisonment to external expectations. People become expert at fulfilling roles others have defined for them while remaining strangers to themselves. They may achieve external success while experiencing internal emptiness. The wake-up call often comes during major life transitions. Retirement removes professional identity. Children become independent, reducing parental demands. Health challenges force priorities to shift. Suddenly, individuals face the question of who they are when they're not constantly responding to others' needs. Many discover they don't know how to answer this question. They've spent so long adapting to external pressures that they've lost touch with their authentic desires and values. This creates profound anxiety and regret about how little of yourself was left to you. Recovery begins with reclaiming time for self-reflection. This might mean saying no to some requests that don't align with your values. It might involve exploring interests you abandoned years ago. It could require difficult conversations about changing your role in certain relationships. The goal isn't selfish isolation, but rather developing a clearer sense of your authentic self so you can contribute to others from a place of genuine choice rather than obligation. When you know who you are and what matters to you, your relationships become more honest and your contributions more meaningful. The fourth regret involves neglecting opportunities for deep self-reflection and the pursuit of wisdom throughout life. Many people become so caught up in daily responsibilities and distractions that they rarely pause to examine their experiences, learn from their mistakes, or consider life's deeper questions. Those who study human development understand that it takes a whole lifetime to learn how to live, and it takes a whole lifetime to learn how to die. They recognize that wisdom develops gradually through sustained reflection on experience, study of profound ideas, and honest examination of one's own character and choices. Modern life often discourages this kind of deep thinking. The pace of daily obligations leaves little time for contemplation. Entertainment options provide constant distraction from serious reflection. Social pressures create expectations to present polished versions of life rather than honestly examining struggles and growth. Many people actively avoid serious self-reflection because it can be uncomfortable. Looking honestly at past mistakes, acknowledging character flaws, or confronting difficult questions requires emotional courage. It feels easier to stay busy with external activities than to face internal uncertainties. You've probably experienced this yourself. Those moments when you start to think deeply about your life, your choices, your regrets, and you quickly find something else to occupy your mind. Maybe you turn on the television, pick up your phone, or throw yourself into some task that doesn't really need immediate attention. This avoidance creates what amounts to a brief and troubled existence. Without regular reflection and learning, people repeat the same mistakes repeatedly. They fail to develop the wisdom needed to navigate life's inevitable challenges. They remain unprepared for major transitions like aging, loss, or their own mortality. The regret becomes particularly acute in later years when major life questions become unavoidable. Individuals realize they spent decades accumulating experiences without extracting much wisdom from them. They face significant challenges without the philosophical resources to handle them gracefully. Some discover they don't really know themselves despite decades of living. They can describe their preferences, accomplishments, and relationships, but they struggle to articulate their core values, their understanding of life's purpose, or their perspective on mortality. I've met people in their 80s who tell me they feel like they're still trying to figure out what life is all about. They've lived through marriages, careers, raising children, and major world events, yet they feel like they never took the time to really understand what it all meant. Developing wisdom requires intentional effort throughout life. This might involve regular journaling to process experiences and emotions. It could mean studying books or ideas that address life's fundamental questions. It might include seeking guidance from individuals who demonstrate the kind of wisdom you hope to develop. The practice also involves embracing uncertainty and complexity rather than seeking simple answers to difficult questions. Wisdom often involves holding multiple perspectives simultaneously and accepting that some of life's most important questions don't have clear-cut answers. Consider setting aside regular time for reflection without specific goals or agendas. Allow yourself to wonder about questions like what kind of person you're becoming, what your experiences have taught you, or how your understanding of life has evolved over time. The fifth and final regret centers on living as if you were immortal, while simultaneously harboring all the fears that come with mortality. This contradiction creates anxiety and poor decision-making that can haunt people throughout their lives, and especially in their final years. Human nature seems to create this strange contradiction where we have all the fears of mortals and all the desires of immortals. We worry constantly about death and aging while making plans and accumulating possessions as if we had unlimited time. This internal conflict prevents us from making peace with mortality or living fully within our finite existence. The pattern often begins with understandable reluctance to confront mortality. Death feels abstract when you're young and healthy. Planning for finite existence can feel morbid or depressing. It seems more positive to focus on growth and possibility rather than limitation and ending. However, completely avoiding awareness of mortality creates several problems. People make long-term commitments without considering their actual remaining time and energy. They postpone important experiences and relationships while pursuing goals that may not matter as much as they initially seemed. You've probably seen this in various forms. People who work themselves to exhaustion in their 60s as if they had decades of unlimited energy ahead. Others who put off reconciling with estranged family members, thinking there will always be time later. Some who spend their retirement years accumulating more possessions instead of focusing on experiences and relationships. They also fail to develop the emotional and spiritual resources needed to face aging and death gracefully. When health problems or other reminders of mortality eventually surface, they feel unprepared and terrified. Their denial leaves them vulnerable to panic and regret when they can no longer avoid these realities. Some individuals become so attached to maintaining their routine activities that they cannot adapt to natural changes that come with aging. I've known people who worked for decades and became so distressed when forced to retire that they couldn't find meaning or purpose without their familiar routines. This extreme attachment to busyness represents a form of mortality denial. Rather than accepting that energy and capacity naturally change over time, some people fight desperately to maintain impossible standards. They exhaust themselves trying to prove they haven't aged, rather than adapting gracefully to new limitations and opportunities. The alternative involves acknowledging mortality not as a morbid fixation, but as a realistic foundation for wise living. When you accept that your time is finite, each day becomes more precious. When you recognize that your energy is limited, you become more selective about how you invest it. This awareness can actually reduce anxiety about death because it integrates mortality into your daily consciousness rather than treating it as a terrifying surprise. People who live with healthy awareness of their finite existence often report feeling more peaceful and purposeful. Practical approaches might include occasional reflection on how you would prioritize your time if you knew you had only a few years remaining. Consider what experiences matter most to you and whether you're making time for them. Think about what kind of person you want to be remembered as and whether your current choices align with that vision. You might also explore spiritual or philosophical perspectives on mortality that resonate with your values and beliefs. Many wisdom traditions offer frameworks for understanding death as a natural part of existence rather than a tragic interruption of life. The goal isn't to become preoccupied with death, but rather to let awareness of mortality inform your choices about how to live. When you accept that your time is limited, you naturally become more intentional about how you spend it. These 5 regrets represent patterns that emerge repeatedly in human experience across different backgrounds and circumstances. They remind us that external factors matter less than how we choose to respond to them. Wealth, status, and even health cannot protect us from these forms of suffering if we make poor choices about how to live. The encouraging news is that awareness of these patterns gives you power to make different choices. You can begin today to shift your focus toward activities that truly matter to you. You can start embracing present opportunities rather than constantly postponing real living. You can reclaim time for yourself while still honoring legitimate obligations to others. You can develop wisdom through reflection and study. You can also make peace with your mortality as a foundation for purposeful living rather than a source of terror. None of these changes require dramatic life overhauls, but they do require conscious intention and consistent practice. The quality of your remaining years depends largely on choices you make starting today. Whether you're currently 30 or 80, you have opportunities to reduce the likelihood that you'll experience these common regrets. Research and experience suggest that people who live with awareness, intentionality, and acceptance tend to face their final years with greater peace and satisfaction. Here's what I want you to think about. Which of these patterns most clearly applies to your current life? What small changes might help you move in a direction that reduces future regret? Remember that the goal isn't perfection, but rather conscious living that honors both your finite existence and your infinite capacity for growth and meaning. Life is precious precisely because it's limited. When we accept this truth and use it to guide our choices, we can create years that feel full and meaningful rather than empty and regretful. The wisdom is available to all of us. The question is whether we'll choose to embrace it while we still have time.